Welcome into another TFA Throwdown. I'm Robbie, he's Akash, and today we are debating two stud wide receivers that you need to choose between in your drafts. We're talking Justin Jefferson, AJ Brown. They are going at overall 22 and 23, so right next to each other in these redraft leagues. So let's dive right in. Akash, give me your best on Justin Jefferson.
So Justin Jefferson, he had the best rookie season in NFL history, basically. But I'm not going to give you surface level analysis like that. Last year, Justin Jefferson had a 26% target share. And even on an offense that was, I think, bottom 6 in passing volume, he still had tremendous stats. He finished as the wide receiver. He finished as the wide receiver 6. He's so 26% target share. He had 1.51 yards per team attempt. From there, even on a very low volume offense, he was able to produce crazy numbers. And so versus AJ Brown in his sophomore season had a 26% target share. And what we see in target share is that after their rookie season, wide receivers tend to hit a certain level and stay there. So after their rookie season, target share becomes sticky. So it's not unreasonable to say AJ Brown can see a 26% target share again. But enter Julio Jones. AJ Brown's still an alpha, so he'll probably command the same level of targets, but we could possibly see a slight dip. Also, AJ Brown is on one of the lowest passing offenses in the league. If I had to bet, I would say that they would finish as the second lowest passing offense in the league. When they finished in 2020 with 2 less attempts per game than Minnesota did, Minnesota's still a pretty low volume passing offense, but they're not as bad as Tennessee. So what we see is for AJ Brown is a guy who's probably hit his level of where he's going to stay for his career in terms of target share, and he's still on a low volume offense. Whereas Justin Jefferson, he can still make that rookie to sophomore jump. You know, at some point there's a ceiling, right? Like you can't go up forever, but he can still jump up from 26% target share. Maybe he can jump up to 27, 28, 29% target share, maybe even the elusive 30% target share. Who knows? But from there, there's still room for growth for Justin Jefferson. And there's also a bit more passing volume, even on a pretty low volume team. You're not drafting him to be a top 3 wide receiver. You're drafting him as probably a low wide receiver 1 at the beginning of the 3rd round or the end of the 2nd round. And so from there, you have a wide receiver who was more efficient in yards per team attempt. In 2020, Justin Jefferson's 1.51 yards per team attempt was higher than AJ Brown's 1.3 yards per team attempt. And you have a guy who probably could see a higher target share and has a higher volume offense. The main difference in them is their touchdown rates. They finished with almost identical points per game in 2020. Justin Jefferson was 17.1 and AJ Brown was 17.8. The difference was AJ Brown was scoring touchdowns at double the rate of Justin Jefferson. The yards divided by touchdown gives you touchdown rate. Every 98 yards, AJ Brown scored a touchdown versus every 200 yards for Justin Jefferson, he would score a touchdown. Basically saying that if Justin Jefferson had AJ Brown's target touchdown rate, he would see double the touchdowns that he had. So touchdown rate is very hard to predict year to year. It's not sticky at all. And so we very well could see regression for AJ Brown. I know that was the big thing that everyone clamored for last year, but it's still a very real thing. Just because you didn't see it going from 2019 to 2020 doesn't mean he's guaranteed to not regress from 2020 to 2021. So with AJ Brown, you're drafting a guy who's a bit more reliant on touchdowns because he's not seeing as high a volume, and AJ Brown's on a lower volume offense, probably going to see a lower target share, and I don't want to bank on the efficiency of him over Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, man, that's exactly where I'm going to start is that efficiency for AJ Brown because it has been so high over the 2 years he's been in the NFL. And we're talking about a 15.7 TD rate. And I'm doing that off of his catches and how many times he's scoring off of those catches. And that's 15.7%, which is even better than like a Tyreek Hill, right? We're talking about one of the best in the NFL, if not the best. His yards per target is crazy good. It's over 10. His yards per reception is over 15. 20 his rookie year. And now we don't have to worry about double teams coming with the addition of Julio Jones, right? There's always the argument of does he lose targets or does he get less double teams, right? On a points per game basis, AJ Brown last year was 5th. And so Some might argue that that target share might go down with the addition of Julio Jones. My counter to that is that there's 192 vacated targets. We have Corey Davis leaving. We have Jonnu Smith going. We have Adam Humphries leaving. So there is volume able to be snapped up by Julio and not eat into AJ Brown's workload. On top of that, I think we have maybe a little bit of change in the offense. Arthur Smith goes over to the Falcons. What do they do? Do they want to give Derrick Henry 378 rushing attempts again, or do they want to back that up a little bit, make sure he can extend on the new deal that they had him sign? Do they want to have him, for more than just one more year and not have the fall off we've seen with guys like Larry Johnson, Priest Holmes? So I think that they could have a little bit of backtrack, maybe get a little bit more balanced than they have in previous years, where you're right, they've been the second most run heavy team in the NFL. So then you got to look at the quarterback, right? Ryan Tannehill, he's been one of the more efficient quarterbacks to go right along with AJ Brown. We're talking about a really, really good touchdown rate in his own right. And I expect that only to get better with the addition of Julio Jones. This is going to be the best tandem of wide receivers he's ever played with in his NFL career. So I think AJ Brown could actually maybe, if he retains his touchdown rate, he retains his efficiency, and he plays all 16. We saw him miss 2 games last year, where he was the 5th overall in points per game. He could push into that top 4, top 5 wide receiver again in 2021. So that's why I like AJ Brown. And then just hitting on Justin Jefferson's side, I think the biggest thing for me is that Kirk Cousins had a really, really big jump in his normal touchdown rate from what we've seen over his past 6-7 years to last year. The Vikings threw a little bit more. The defense was worse, right? And he actually had above a 5% touchdown rate. He was all the way up to 6.8. And so I do think that regresses a little bit. He probably goes from 35 touchdowns back down to 29, 30, maybe 31, somewhere around there. And so if we're talking about Adam Thielen, has always commanded a large touchdown percentage in his own right. Irv Smith's going to take a bigger role in this offense as a big body tight end guy. So I'm worried if Justin Jefferson's touchdown rate can catch or at least even the gap between him and AJ Brown. And I just don't think it does. And I think the targets for AJ Brown click up because he's going to play a full, hopefully 17-game season and keep up with Justin Jefferson in that regard.
To your point of vacated targets, I don't think vacated targets are I don't use it in my analysis, just because target share isn't something to be given. It's not something that, if a player leaves 100 targets, it doesn't mean that whatever player you want will get those 100 targets. For example, that's just an extreme example, but players earn their targets. And so AJ Brown, if he's the type of guy to earn 26% target share, that's what he'll be no matter what kind of vacated targets are. That's just how it is. That's like based on how targets work. They're earned by wide receivers running routes well or getting open to earn them. And to your point about touchdown rate, it's not that AJ Brown is, I think it's the complete opposite of what you're saying, in my opinion, that AJ Brown isn't better because his touchdown rate has been so high. It's that AJ Brown's worse because his touchdown rate has been so high. And that's what he's needed to be able to close the gap. He'll need to have a high touchdown rate again to close the gap between him and Justin Jefferson based on the expected volume. I chase volume and I hope for efficiency, right? And so if we look at wide receivers with at least one top 12 season in their career who've played 5 or more seasons in the NFL, if we see AJ Brown's touchdown rate, yards divided by touchdowns, of 110, we see that 81 wide receivers had a worse touchdown rate and 2 wide receivers had a better touchdown rate. So over the course of his career, I expect regression for AJ Brown unless he is the complete outlier to touchdown rate rules, right? And so I don't bet on him being an outlier. I would expect the touchdown rate to go down eventually. Eventually, it catches up to him, right? And so he needs that to close the gap. He needed that to close the gap between him and Jefferson in points per game when Jefferson was only a rookie. And so for him to continue that, I wouldn't bet on it. And so I would take Justin Jefferson, who I expect to have higher volume and more efficiency in terms of yards per game pass attempt. I would take Justin Jefferson over AJ Brown.
Yeah. Going to the first point of vacated targets, I'd absolutely see what you're saying is that just because there's 192 doesn't mean this certain percentage goes to that player. I guess what I would say is if you have a projected amount of attempts, right? Let's say they're going to throw 520 times. There's going to be a certain amount, like you're saying, that go to AJ Brown. Let's say that's 26%, and a certain amount that's going to go to Julio. Let's say it's 18% or whatever it is. And I guess my point was when you're doing the math, I'm not worried about Julio and what he's going to command because he's getting open and he's going to be that guy that earns those targets. I'm not worried about that affecting AJ Brown because
Right.
they do pass enough, right? So I
Mm,
absolutely hear that.
I agree.
That's a great point. And then just going back to the touchdown rate, yeah, you're right. I think it does probably regress a little bit. He got 11 in just 106 targets last year in 14 games. I do think, however, that um, even with him just having even with him having a regressed touchdown rate, he's going to play those 16 games. We saw on a points per game basis, he was better than Justin Jefferson. Can Justin Jefferson take that next step? Absolutely. I think the biggest point that I don't think you made yet is that can Adam Thielen's 14 touchdowns or whatever he have, can Justin Jefferson start to get that share? And now they're both at 11 or 12 touchdowns in a season. I think that can be in the cards. If I'm a betting man, I'm going to bet on AJ Brown to have more touchdowns than Justin Jefferson. The targets I think is going to be a little bit closer than what I think you have in your mind. I do think they're both in the 125 to 140 target range because I don't think Julio is taking away from AJ Brown. And if he's playing a full 16 games, he would have been in that 120-ish, 125-ish range. Add on another game for a 17th game, I think he's right in that range.
Thielen, he's never been a big touchdown guy in his career, right? Like he had 9 touchdowns as his career high before last year, and he hit 14, which was, I believe, third in the NFL behind Adams and Tyreek. And so it just furthers the anecdotal evidence that touchdown rate and touchdowns can be very fluky year to year. They're not something to be counted on. Thielen had a really high red zone target share last year, right? You could see that go down closer to what his actual target share was. It was, I believe, it was around 20%, and his red zone target share was around 40%. So you could see that go down. You could see touchdowns go down. It's not something that I try to predict year to year. I'll if I'm gonna make projections, I'll give a number that's pretty mid-range of what range of outcomes is, but I'll never try to carry touchdown numbers year to year. I'll always predict it to regress to sort of the average, and so from there, that's AJ Brown's best attribute. That's what he needs to catch up to Justin Jefferson. So I'm saying that I'll take Jefferson over him because I believe he'll see more volume.
Guys, that's all we have for you. I personally have these guys very, very close to my rankings. They are wide receivers 7 and 8. Akash, I don't know. I'm guessing you have them pretty close as well.
Yeah,
Yep.
somewhat.
Yep.
I'll probably
So
have to
so
figure
we
it
want
out.
we want you guys to tell us where you have these guys in your rankings or who you're wanting to draft in your leagues. AJ Brown, Justin Jefferson. Let us know in the comments below, and we'll see you on the next video.